Welcome to the space where we're exploring a vision for how to live well in the things we can't help but face. I'm Jason Jensen, and I'm here with my buddy Pete. Well, Pete, we're starting a new series on AI and how to navigate this time in history, but really in our lives, of this emergent technology that is contentious, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be sorting through that. And maybe what's really helpful for people to know is you and I have not had a chance to even talk about it. So all of this is fresh perspective and real-time dialogue as we are sorting this out in our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't had any sort of extensive time to dialogue about it outside of now. So for those
Should
who
be
are
fun.
listening, that's the actual dynamic. But yeah, we're starting the series. I'm here with my buddy Pete. And yeah, the place I want to start is, how do I begin to think about integrating this huge movement of technology, this emergent technology that is changing a lot of how work happens, how thought occurs, how we begin to relate to each other. I'm thinking of things like email, like there's just this outsourcing of communication to something else.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start to think about where do you begin to think of how to start sorting through your thoughts in how should we approach this so that it's good for us, it's good for our neighbor, it's good for society,
Mm-hmm.
and as individuals, how do we begin to move in that?
Well, I don't know how. It's good to be here with you.
Well, it's good to be
By
here
the
with
way,
you too.
yeah. And I'm looking forward to this as a series because of the size of the thing, and I'm committed to trying to approach it as an open question. Um,
As in, it's going to keep unfolding as we
whether we like it or not, and so I think we have to bring ourselves to a subject that's this sizable with a willingness to just keep asking questions. And one of the inherent dangers that I see with all technological advancement in recent years, last 2 decades, really since the advent of the internet, is the unscrupulous approach of presuming that enough due thought and attention has gone into the development of the technology to the point that when I encounter it, responsible action has already been taken. And I think that is a very dangerous and very dim-witted assumption. And so to be willing to ask the question about the whole thing, no matter how long we've been using the thing or how long it's been seemingly incorporated into our lives. And the blind use of any tech, whether it's a camera or a smartphone or an internet, is one of the reasons why I think we have such a societal churn around this. And you use the word integration. And integration is certainly not something that you see. You don't see integration or coherence because the technologies aren't developed in the first place with those drivers in mind. That's not the impetus for the development of the tech. I think there's many other motivations that the tech is developed with from the jump, and we can get to some of that. So I think my hope for the series would be that an audience would have a cultivated capacity to think carefully, and that skill would be something that was cultivated against the backdrop now of this severe need we have. If we don't think carefully and properly about this one, the consequences are dire. And we're already past the point of no return on a few of these considerations, like whether or not it will ever, whether the prospect of not having AI is a possibility seems to be a foregone conclusion at this point. And that alone is a staggering reality to put before your mind and your heart. And if you're a parent, to think about the implications of that for your offspring and your grandchildren, for example. What we've seen happen in the last 6 months should stop people in their tracks and give them pause for thought. So integration is the result of properly arranging things in your mind before you begin to implement them into a living system. And I hope that we can, in our own humble way, approach the matter in a way that can benefit people at the level of their thinking, not merely their usage or their implementation of the thing.
Yeah. So, what are some of the things in the last 6 months that give you pause for concern?
Well, certainly the move from AI as a glorified search engine that seems to have a bit more personality than Google, to what we see with Claude and agentic AI and the development of these so-called agents that are, basically functionaries for your own consciousness is how they're sold. But the development of these near to sentient agents that are doing something on their own apart from your conscious command, right? And so the degrees of separation from the human mind and heart is something that concerns me. And I think it ought to concern all of us. And there becomes a very important moment where we have to ask the question, who has what here? And what appears to me to be the case is that at some point we have to tell the truth that we end up serving the technology. If we can't wake up and face a day without the thought of the use of this to move from one moment to the next, or to mediate between me and clients or colleagues in my workflow, or in another instance, to drive me from one end of town to another, then we're in a serious moment in the human epic. I've said before in previous episodes, to emphasize this quote from Marshall McLuhan. This is a paraphrase, but all media extensions of man are an amputation. And whether it's thought about navigating the world literally in its physical form, like how many people in their 20s could find their way from where you and I live to some street in downtown Vancouver without the use of a screen. That's evidence of an amputation, of a very real aspect of our survival. Or how many people have a spate of recipes in their minds anymore that they could rattle off in their kitchen by heart? It doesn't matter which vector you follow out in daily life. We are becoming, I would say, not integrated, but absorbed into a range of activities that the longer we spend time there, corresponds to a decrease in human capacity. And that is that's a deep concern to me. So I hope that we can just put questions in front of people's minds and hearts. And what I would hope is that people can begin asking these questions in communal ways. I mean, one of the reasons that we have the social trouble that we do at all is because of the technologies that we're talking about implementing more of. You know, social media hasn't delivered on its promise to connect people in the way that it was initially claimed.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I borrow this thought from a writer named Paul Kingsnorth, whom I have a great deal of respect for. But I was reading him on the subject. He's written quite extensively about the matter in fictional and nonfiction terms, and he's had a fascinating journey, spiritual journey as a man. He was a neo-paganist and was actually for a time living a Wiccan lifestyle. And recently, within the last, as I understand it, within the last 10 years, felt called by Christ into Christianity. But he's a very accomplished writer, and he emphasizes that we are storytelling creatures, and that really every bit of our lives is predicated on one story or another. And what we're experiencing now, hidden in plain sight, right under our noses, is a kind of cultural colonization. I'm not speaking to his theory here now, just to set it up. We're colonized in that we are being actively separated from our mooring to the stories that built our society, that were the human heritage, in our case, of the West. And every new development in technology or societal outgrowth is itself predicated on a story. And the story that Silicon Valley has told since its inception has not changed one bit. They just continue to develop their technologies without delivering on their promise. They have yet to prove to anybody how you can live an abundant life without personal transformation. And they don't promise personal transformation. They promise utopia, right? And that is the perfection of life without you having to change one bit. It's all through technological innovation and implementation. And we can get to this later on, I'm sure, but when you listen to the story that they're telling, they're speaking in openly religious terms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And it's a bipolar story. You have the very developers warning us that this could end our civilization. And that doesn't sound integrated to me. That sounds the opposite. That sounds like a fractured story. But it's a story nonetheless. And it's the story of a promise on utopia. If we would just integrate one more aspect of their technology into our lives, we'll finally get there. And then the grand end to the story, of course, that they all tell is that they're summoning a God into existence. And they use that terminology quite openly. I'm sure we could have Chat GPT or a Claude survey all of the Joe Rogan episodes and just listen to the number of times he has openly claimed that we need an AI government, and what's being created right now is a God. We make a God. And so none of that strikes me as moored to any kind of reliable wisdom tradition. And in fact, the opposite, I think, is true. It is a resistance to what are thought of as the God-haunted acts of our forebears, and thrusts us into what I think is a foolhardy notion that somehow we've overcome any of that, any of our prior need, any of our prior limitations, any of our prior tether to the transcendent. We make something in our own image that we claim is going to perfect society without ever having to prove why that should be trusted.
Yeah. So let me,
I know
that's
there was
a
a
lot.
lot there. I know.
So let me just try and
And sorry that's so
summarize.
heavy if
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. So we're in this moment of time where we have very powerful technology coming about that we can't turn back on. It seems the proliferation has already gone too far for it to.
It seems that way.
It seems like we can't claw it back, or let's just work with that.
Yes.
That's the assumption that you and I are working on. It's here.
It's
right?
here.
In the same way, the internet's not going away either.
Yeah.
And then that we are narrative people in that we go through life with a story that at least makes sense to us. Whether that's true or not is a different, that's a different kettle of fish.
That's right.
And oftentimes it's not true. You know, even in my own life, I experience like, oh, I'm living this narrative that sometimes in community it's reflected back as like, that's a false narrative. That's not
we can't
actually
even
true.
straighten out our stories with our own spouses.
Yeah.
You know, that's enough for a given day.
Yeah. And enough of a proof point that we're all living a story. And, you know, those who are closest to us, our stories clash in a way that we try to sort out. And part of what maturity is being able to hold, like you have a story and I have a story, and I don't see reality perfectly.
Yeah, very good.
And so all of that is coming into this moment of time where we have the rapid advancement of this thing in the name of progress, not in the name of what's best for humanity.
Yes.
We also have in this narrative, hey, we don't know, I'm just summarizing, we don't know where this is go. It could be disastrous and it could be utopia, you know, just the best thing ever. People won't have to work anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
like
right.
this is going to solve so many problems. Cancer, well, you know, it'll find ways to cure cancer, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I also hear in the narrative there is, if we don't do it, the bad guys are going to do it.
Oh yeah, that's that's a big leveraging point.
And so you better be okay with funding this whole thing. And just to add to the quagmire is so much of the economy is on this bet.
Bet is good language.
The other thing that is openly stated is we don't know how this works. It's kind of a black box, and we just put more into the black box and then something comes out. And I would say that that's not true. That's not a true claim. However, the thing looks like magic. You know, like it really does.
Yeah.
I type something in and value comes out, you know, it's alchemy. You know, like that's what it feels like. It's like, I'm turning a rock into gold.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so powerful.
It's a great metaphor
of technology as alchemy. And as the average person, which I'm going to say I'm in the average category in understanding how this technology truly works. Like I have some idea of how it works, but I'm not a developer. You know, there's people on my team who understand this at far greater lengths than I do. It's to the mechanistic dynamics of how LLMs work and how AI works. But the other part of the narrative is that uh, 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 AGI is around the corner,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, we're so close. It's just this next thing is going to happen, and then it's going to have consciousness of its own,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, as if it's like the way the story that we're inhabiting in this is that is almost months away.
Yeah.
Or a
That's
few
right.
short years away
Imminent.
at the most.
Imminent.
It's imminent.
Yeah.
So that's, just to summarize, it's like we got this crazy narrative
Yeah.
that is coming to us that we've doubled down on economically. We've doubled down on it politically. Like, if we don't do it, like, especially as we find ourselves in North America, like the global power that America, but North
Mm-hmm.
America is,
Mm-hmm.
can go to, specifically it's China.
Yeah.
Like China is going to do it if we don't.
Yeah. This becomes the monolith around which cultural hegemony is now claimed, right? This one thing becomes the reflective aid in our assessment about societal sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm leery of any claims of the kind when one thing is cited as the entire solution, right? And the whole contingency. So I'm with you.
Yeah. I also want to just straighten out. I don't feel like what you're saying is technology is bad.
Mm-mm.
And you said, hey, like we've severed ourselves, your Marshall McLuhan paraphrase. Yep. I remember a time pre-GPS or pre-GPS, like you could buy GPS specific units.
An old Garmin. Yeah.
But I have always struggled with direction. Like I would say I have a learning disability. Like,
did you have anybody to teach you?
I don't know what that means, but my spatial awareness for big city stuff, it has always been limited.
Okay.
And so even moving to the town that we did, like I would know a route, but I would be driving a route and going, oh, I go this way to get somewhere else. And then I realized, oh, there's another road that is literally 40% faster.
Right.
And so that general sense of awareness in that way is just lacking. And so the relief that came when I had a GPS available to me all the time was massive. And I understand that if I just keep putting that down, I'm going to atrophy the part of my brain that's going to develop in that way as well.
Well, and again, we don't have to get stuck here.
Yeah.
But you're also going to atrophy the other things associated with that part of your brain, like the part of you that is accustomed to encountering another human in your going out of the home in order to find your way.
Yeah.
And the solidarity that we used to share in those spaces, asking for directions as a common human dynamic and as a social artifact of a bygone era of neighborhood. And the world in the era that I recall growing up in was neighborly in that sense. And so we're not just, this is one of the things that I would hope and pray that people can think on, is that we're not only talking about the self as a siloed or atomized subject. That's how we've become accustomed to thinking about the self. So it's not merely that my capacity as an individual to navigate the world is eroded by the manufacture of new media and technology that claim to aid me in my capacity to navigate the world. It's that there's always a tethered effect and that the associated capacities are themselves lost as well. And we don't think about beyond the individual.
Yeah. So what you're saying to me is once I started using my iPhone for navigation, my capacity to connect to other neighborhoods and
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
was lost to me
By
as well.
proxy. That's
Yeah.
right. And if you want proof of that, just observe the socialization patterns of young people in public.
Mm.
The individual in public at 18 or 19 years old, and how much of that is them in a siloed world, a screen and a self reflecting back on that screen out there in the world. And if they're on the sea train or the sky train rather, or they're so much as walking down the road, if they do that anymore, they do not have the same social apparatus in them that has been trained into the capacity to greet a neighbor, a stranger, or a stranger as a neighbor,
Hmm.
and identify your shared humanity with that person. We're out here doing this together. And when we used to venture out of our homes, that was the space that we entered into. We entered into a social space, a spate of social prospects. And I had to develop myself as a social agent. That was part of the maturation process. That's what I mean by cultural colonization and the severance from our prior capacities, right? And I think that's what McLuhan is on about when he says that all these media extensions of man are themselves amputations. There's degrees of amputation.
Mm.
And so I hope that as we go along, those themes can kind of set in for people, and we
Mhm.
can get them before people's minds, and slow enough to, so much of this is remedied if people would but think, if they would take the time to think about this. And I think a lot of what we're going to be doing in the initial case is helping people ask the right questions, right?
Mm.
um, again, in our own humble way, as a couple of average Joes. I'm by trade a carpenter and a psychotherapist. So what grounds do I have, right? Well, I have my human grounds. I have my human experience. I have my concerns for my neighbor and my children, and that's enough. That's enough to motivate you into ongoing and responsible education about this. And if everybody kind of picked up that mantle with us or with their neighbor, we end up having a, a host of better opportunities for forward movement. And we end up finding channels for solidarity in that too.
Mm.
So I'm not without hope on this at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to contrast that one Marshall McLuhan quote with
Sure.
another one of his,
Yeah.
which is all technology is an extension of the senses,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that is a,
Very good.
uh, um, I love that I can phone my wife at
Mm-hmm.
work, like, and, carrier pigeon, like,
Yeah.
I'm less connected to my wife out and about than I want to be. And maybe that's a consideration in and of itself,
Yeah.
but there are ways in which even things I consider a good, like the gospel spreading in the early church through the technology of the Roman road, are uh, there is good here to be had, and I just think it's well, maybe I don't know where you stand in that. It's like I don't think you're saying all technology is bad.
No, you will never hear me say that.
And so
I drove here in a truck.
yeah, and so I think just to clearly state where we're coming is saying that integrating process of technology really matters.
Yeah.
Because technology doesn't find us as neutral,
That's right.
and it has intention behind its creation, and it comes with narrative that it asks us to enter into. And if that narrative is not true, then it doesn't help us navigate reality properly.
Agreed.
And so this is the groundwork for the conversation
Great.
that we've been having. So what, I feel like that's a good kind of laying of the land. What do you do when somebody, I'm hearing of people who are being mandated to use AI in their workflows at work. So somebody I know is an animator, and they've just had a directive of you have to use this in your workflow. I have another example of a developer, which I think is actually a little bit different. They're in the process of finding a new job.
Okay.
And every interviewer is saying, do you use AI? How do you use AI in your workflow? And the question that she was reflecting is saying, it seems so silly because it obviously has a utility that you figure out how to integrate into your workflow. But can we get to the heart of what developing is, as not a commodity, but as a resource? And that kind of part of the narrative also feels lost. So this tension between efficiency and reason, like a reason of doing the thing.
And why.
And intention maybe is another part. Like, so efficiency and intention, and how those two things like play together. So where do you begin if somebody says, hey, I'm being asked to put AI in my workflow as a mandate? How do we start to think about that? Not as how do we manage authority, but how do we start to say, is there a case for us to make that's better not to do that we can then articulate?
Better not to use the tech?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or how do I say, oh, well, this is where are there principles I can start to discern in how to use it for the betterment of others?
Yeah.
Where do you begin in that?
Yeah. I go back to what I always go back to. We call them first principles for a reason. And, this is what Lewis describes in the Abolition of Man as the Tao. But the place I would invite that we go to, whether we're dealing with someone who has any kind of spiritual heritage or not, is to the place where Jesus is asked, what is the greatest commandment? To love God with all your mind, body, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And at that point, I have a grounding for consideration of all things. And technology is no different. It could be, it doesn't matter what I'm considering. That's my grounding. And so I'm mandated to use this in the work. My employment is contingent on my use, if I understand the prospect properly. So initially off the jump, I'm reasoning about whether or not I'm meant to be an employee here at all. And that is a question that ought to be asked more often than it is, because people are tethering themselves to a promise on a salary and all of those things. And it doesn't take very long to get very twisted up and to lose enormous parts of yourself against that backdrop. But let's say you've reasoned that the company is in general living out an ethic that you can find a way to work inside of, right? And it is messy like that in all workspaces in modern life. Very rare are the ones like, I'll say like Glass Canvas, that there's a unified ethic, everybody's on board, and everybody is yielded to that set of principles. And the contingency there is participation along those lines or not participating at all, right? And I wish that more companies were so clarified in their purpose as this lot.
Thank you.
Way
Yeah.
to go,
Yeah.
you know. But what we're left with in the vast majority of cases is some hodgepodge of values, right? And that's where most people live and move and have their being for 8 to 10 hours a day. So how can I deploy this thing into the principles that I live by is the question.
Mm-hmm.
And that means, you know, if I'm in a collegial dynamic and I'm working on a team, how can I leverage the capacities of this tool into the values that I have? And we can imagine, you know, being in several sectors of business. Doesn't matter if you're working at a junior oil company and you've got an AI agent that you've set to the task of helping you on the prospecting side. You know, where are the oil fields that are going to be most likely to give us the greatest yields? And, you know, what's the best approach to the acquisition of those? Or on the other end of the spectrum, your illustrator that you mentioned. The second question I would ask after values, I suppose, is how can I implement this tech while still telling the truth about me? To not bear false witness. And that means that I'm still going to approach my work as an art and a craft and an expression of the self that is true. And I think what we see happening now, and the reason so many people feel atomized, separated out from themselves, is because they're all prepared to play a game. And it is to bear as much false witness as I need in order to maintain my status of employment, or to leverage the tech against my neighbors so I can be the one who had the best idea or the best illustration or whatever. And all of a sudden, human creativity is being progressively taken out of that picture for us. And something like unto a machine model of creativity is put in front of us. And everybody's living inside of that lie. And I just want to say again, we're having a conversation right now about the workplace that wasn't even possible a mere 2 years ago. It's changed that quickly. And you have whole graduating classes at universities all over North America walking out the second that one of the spokespersons from the AI world gets up there to give them a commencement address. For that very reason, young people can feel the loss of their human agency right in front of their nose before they've even stepped out into the world that they're supposed to go and stake a claim inside of. And so, how can I maintain a true account of my own creative capacity in my workplace for the sake of the values that we claim to share? I think is an important range of thought about that. And one of the ways that we steer the ship in the right direction is by daring to speak of these things. You know, I can be thought of as a bit of a wet blanket on all of this because I'm constantly asking people to slow down and think. You know, I think I've told you I want to make some t-shirts that say, look up, who owns that camera? Okay? Every traffic stop that you're at now, there's a camera that's observing you. We live in public. Okay? What have we lost there against the backdrop of what we claim to have gained? Who is made more secure by the presence of those cameras? And what have you lost for that inside of that bargain? And I would say one of the things that we've lost is sacred space. Privacy was sacred. We've lost our privacy. We've surrendered it over under the claim that our safety will be increased. Okay? And now you can't travel outside. One of the things that this is a bit of a tangent, but it's related. Okay.
Mhm.
What do we lose against the backdrop of what we claim to gain, or what's being sold to us as gain? When I go out on a walk with my daughters in the evening, I'll have them play a game with me. And we don't pass by a home without counting whether or not it's got a door cam on
Mm.
it. And at last count, I think we were at 78% of the neighborhood. Okay, 78 houses in 100 houses have a camera that is observing you walk by in HD.
Mm.
And so I no longer can go for a walk with my daughter in the neighborhood without the observation of some company. Okay. And I'd love to see the statistics on whose home has been made more secure by the implementation of that tech. And we're not even talking yet about the implications of the technology, about what it could be used for otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But the human person, the human enterprise as a social animal is contingent on having sacred spaces that we can occupy without the interruption of anything else. And less and less and less do we have those opportunities in our modern world. I can't even go hunting anymore without being observed.
Hmm.
There's a GPS tracker on my truck that knows where I am. You know, it's harder and harder to actually get lost. And getting lost was actually a valuable thing to have to face. It's a threat that conditions you into a different kind of temperament. And when you take that away, again, it's an amputation of a prior sensibility and therefore a prior capacity that we used to have.
Yeah. So trying to summarize that, or trying to this is more in just technology.
Mm-hmm.
As it advances, what do we give up of our humanity?
That's right.
And one of the things that we've given up is our privacy. And that reminds me of a story. Part of the myth of AI is that your stuff goes into the computer, computer figures it out, and then it comes back to you.
Mm-hmm.
But those models are actually being trained by real people.
That's right.
And Africa is a huge outsourcing part of this. And what we don't realize is like technology, like Roombas, you know, like the little vacuum, like especially the ones that aren't. There's like LiDAR ones, and then there's actual camera ones, right? And the LiDAR ones are like whatever, they're different. And those images just went to Africa. And so your privacy from that technology, you weren't even aware that your images of you sitting on the toilet and the Roomba coming into you like are being fed and seen by people in Africa.
Yeah.
Your kids running around naked.
Yeah.
You know, like
that's not accidental either.
Yeah. It was baked into the system from the beginning that would be required.
That's right.
Yeah. And the same thing is true of AI. It's just we're like, maybe as a culture, which I say maybe is a good thing, is like, who is training this? Is like maybe more in the collective consciousness than it was with like the Roombas.
Agreed.
But it's still that's happening, you know? So when you are submitting these, whatever your prompts into the system, you are, there's false witness being born in that it's not being seen by people. That is not true.
That's not true for a second. And it wasn't true from the beginning. And I would dare to say that it will never be true in the forms of tech as they're developed, if they continue to be developed the way that they have been to this point. And we can just expect more of the same. until people slow down, think long enough to say what they're not going to tolerate, and then prove that in what they don't use. Hey, we miss that opportunity with AI, and we do tend to miss it because we're sold these things on the grounds of our security, our convenience, and our pleasure, right? Primarily those things. And you know, another case in point, there's a machinery to all of this, and I think machinery is good language for the alternatives to our humanity, okay, in terms of what is driving us forward. If you read the end user agreement on Microsoft Word right now, it's a very worthy question. Who owns the content that I'm putting into this document that I think I'm writing? Okay? And the end user agreement is pretty clear. Microsoft does. And they're going to utilize that to build their AI to get to the front of the line. And Anthropic paid out a $1.5 billion settlement in a class action suit to a bunch of writers and publishers for this very reason. But of course, Anthropic doesn't care about that payout, okay? Because they're, at the time of the valuation, it was a $30 billion company. And this was just one more step in their development, just a speed bump along the way. And of course, to them, in the collective, in the main, you're not a person. You're just a line item on a quarterly budget sheet. And payouts of that kind, it doesn't matter if it's in the AI space or if it's in the pharmaceutical space, Purdue Pharma, we could rattle off a million of these instances with big tech and big industry and big business. And I think of these as inevitable consequences of centralization, of tech being owned by a very few but used by the many, and of loss of the first commandment and the greatest commandment, So I think it's important to constantly rehearse with people that be cautious what you give your consent to. Think carefully about what you're giving away in the process of your consumption and your implementation of these technologies. Whether it's the self-driving car that you prefer to having to navigate the world and the inconvenience of other people, right? And the loss of the skill about navigating other people in traffic from one place to another, or whether it is the labor you used to have to go to acquire knowledge of various kinds to be able to rehearse that and regurgitate it for somebody else's benefit as a teacher, for example, or in the development of your graduate thesis or your doctoral dissertation. How many of those are your ideas any longer? How much of that have you incorporated into your person so that you can deploy it into the world as knowledge? And that's eroding.
Yeah, I think it might be good to touch on something that you and I have connected about is the difference between data being just a zero
as information,
yeah. And then it's rolled up into information, which is a bit of more of a sorting out of data.
Yeah, aggregated.
And so, but then that can get internalized in somebody as knowledge, where somebody actually knows what this information is talking about. And that knowledge with experience can get applied in context as wisdom.
That's right.
And so you have data, information, knowledge, and wisdom.
Yeah.
So,
and if people struggle with those as in definitional terms, one of the ways that we can think about what knowledge is, and I'm borrowing this from a philosopher named Dallas Willard, knowledge is the capacity to represent something as it is on an appropriate basis of thought and experience. Wisdom is knowing what to do with that knowledge once acquired, how to submit that into the human goods that we all need in order to keep this enterprise going in the right direction.
Yeah, and what's helpful in those definitions, data, information, knowledge, wisdom, is that as we consider AI, as people consider integrating these things into your workflow, it's that information is radically increasing, but knowledge is not.
That's right.
And so the limitations of your development as a human being are not how much information you have access to, but how much knowledge you have integrated into your person.
Yeah, and that's always contingent on your determination, right? But that's what gets tricky in this.
Because we're shortcutting.
We're shortcutting, and that's all.
Information is cheap now. It has been.
That's right.
It's the cheapest it's ever been in history.
That's right. Yeah, and I think about this in metaphorical terms like inflation. There's inflation. There's an inflationary amount of information, and it's never been the case that if you were going to acquire knowledge, you didn't have to pay for it in some way. And that's still true today. You may be very adept at being plugged into the information source, but you can't claim knowledge until you're able to tell me what that's about. And what we've seen happen is, in inflationary terms, the amount of information access has increased, but the price on that has decreased. And so information ends up being worth less because it's flooded into the market like a fiat currency.
Yeah.
Okay? And,
and just to break that down.
Yeah, please.
If you and I are in a society and we're trading clamshells and we know there's 100 clamshells, and I know this water is worth one clamshell.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden there's 10,000 clamshells, this is going to be worth way more than one. And so the same thing has happened in an inflationary context in information. That's just what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and there has been this effect of, the promise was the more access to information, the more knowledgeable people would become. And forget about wisdom. No one was making claims on people becoming wiser. Wisdom as a concept societally is something that's hardly discussed at all, right? Information and knowledge is what drives universities, etc. But the promise was, with the internet, we'll all become geniuses because we have access to more information. How many more geniuses have you met in the last week? Okay? Simply by virtue of their access to information. I've met no more than I knew before, probably fewer. There was a cost before.
But surely that there, I do have, maybe I don't feel like the claim was richer, or I don't remember it coming to me in that way, but more, I do feel like I have a wealth of information that I can draw on that is different. Like I remember pre-internet world, and you're like, if I needed to figure something out, I had to go to an encyclopedia.
Right. I had to pay for it.
And so let's just take making biltong, right? Which is I was able to do that because it's the information on how to do that is freely available now.
And you didn't have to go and be trained by another human being in their presence. And you didn't have to reason, am I going to devote myself to figuring out how to make biltong this week? Or am I going to deploy myself into other directions? And so clarity becomes more diffuse about aspirations too. Oh, you would have had to earn it differently, right? And there's something about craft in that space.
What's funny is that I learned it from the internet, but I still went to my biltong, just for context.
Yeah.
If people don't know, it's like a cured meat that's
South
dried.
African jerky.
No, it's offensive, but helpful as an analogy.
Yeah.
But I still went to my local South African store and we're
Mhm.
like, hey, what vinegar do you guys use?
Yeah, you wanted
Like the
to
one
go to a
I've tasted,
craftsperson.
the one I've tasted, like, you know, because you got a whole range of vinegar that you can put onto the thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, we use white vinegar. And I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
So it's funny that even in that example, it's still connected to knowledge as opposed to just information for me, because I know the guys who are making this that inspired me.
Knowledge and heritage. There's a heritage connected to this. It's craft.
Yeah.
And it's a cultural craft. That's what I meant by the colonized self of the modern era, right? Biltong is a legacy-rich food item that comes from a beautiful culture.
Yeah.
And
and birthed out of survival. And,
that's right. There's a whole history there.
Yeah.
And the person who goes to the internet and watches a 5-minute YouTube video on how to build a biltong box and put a light in there, and they're going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Right? But what is lost in the appropriation of that knowledge, or the taking on of it, you know, the apprehension of that in terms of cultural legacy and what we're tethered to, what the self is tethered to.
And when you say tethered, it's like, okay, so I can learn how to make biltong. Like, let's just say we're in Canada right now, you know.
We'll call this the biltong episode.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because when I grew up eating biltong, right? So my return to it has way more meaning to me than just learning how to do it. And the connection that I have to my ancestors in, you know, I have lineage in South Africa that's further than maybe many people have lineage in Canada, right? And so the idea that I'm connected to them going, I don't have refrigeration, but we have a springbok that we need to preserve this meat from. And how do we do it so that flies don't land on the thing? And all, like, so it's coriander spice, and it's connected to the spice trade that South Africa was the point of. But if somebody's like, this tastes good, how do I make it? Then they're divorced from all of that. Yeah. And they find themselves, when you say tethered, I'm trying to break that down for somebody and saying,
that's it.
Untethered is like, well, I don't know. I'm floating in space.
You're floating in space
with no idea of like how this thing came into being.
Yeah. Kingsnorth, who I was mentioning before, uses the language of homelessness a great deal to describe the modern self. And this is precisely what he's speaking to, is this severance from the legacy of our forebears and the reason that they did the things that they do, and the traditions that we keep, and the deep meaning in our craft, right? And biltong tastes better when you know those stories. You know, it's there's something beautiful about the consumption of it when you think about the life and death dynamics that went into this tradition that became a food, right? And
it's an identity.
And it's an identity.
Yeah.
And you're moored to something transcendent. It transcends the self. And children being raised into this breakneck pace, you know, with a screen ever before them and no cultural heritage. That is the moment that we're in. And we could talk about biltong. We could talk about doing resto mods on old muscle cars. We could talk about what's becoming of something beloved to me, carpentry. Okay? 3D homes being printed, the movement to modular design, all of these things. And I'm not saying modular is bad, right, as an example. But when it's not tethered to a legacy, a tradition, a people, we have to ask something that very rarely gets asked. What is the meaning of this? I've forgotten the name of the rabbi, but the quote was so beautifully put. As Lord so-and-so rabbi in the UK.
Neusner?
No, member of the House of Lords. So brilliant man. Maybe it'll come to me later in the episode. But he said, science takes things apart to see how they work. Religion puts things together to see what they mean. Okay? And that's back to humanity being a storytelling people, right? We're not merely an animal. We're certainly not a machine, though we've been sold on that, the human being as a sealed unit with inputs and outputs and this mechanistic view of the self. We are storytelling people, and our health and our well-being, because we're also, this is part of what gets lost in the modern story, we are spiritual selves with a spiritual legacy. And the customs that we keep, the rituals we engage around everything from the way that we keep a home to the way we make or harvest our food is all rooted and nested in story from the beginning of time. And it's true what we were saying before, that technology is not inherently bad, but beware the technology that would sever you from your story. Beware the technology that would require your use of the thing without asking about its meaning. That's the moment that we're in as a culture.
Yeah. I just want to expand on this biltong thing.
Yeah, great.
Because the second somebody comes into our home, my two youngest girls offer people biltong.
I've had this experience myself.
And, one form of biltong is called a chili bite. And so they're like, would you like a chili bite? And I never taught them how to do that. I modeled it for them. And they have come to understand that it is an extension of identity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've never had this conversation with them.
Yeah. But ostensibly what they're representing in the moment is, my dad made this.
My dad made this, and it's connected to our heritage.
That's right. And it's my joy to offer this to you.
And it is some good part of my lineage.
That's right.
That has craft and everything, and I think you'll enjoy it.
That's right.
And immediately they can sink into that. Like almost, and so what's so beautiful about it is how human that is.
Yeah. All of a sudden, we're neighbors. Because we're sharing out of life with each other. Your daughters have trained themselves there through the offering of this beautiful craft and substance, food source, into a neighborly dynamic. Welcome here. This is who we are. We'd like to nourish you with our legacy.
Yeah. Do you want a piece of hanging meat from the garage?
I promise it didn't have flies on it.
Yeah. But the feeling that I get when they do it, they don't say, sometimes they do, but most of the time they say, would you like it? They don't even ask.
There's no permission needed.
There's no permission needed. And this is what's at stake.
That's right.
Is the feeling that I get where I'm like, oh, that it brings joy to me that is a reality. There's something about how my little girls can relate to the person we are taking in through hospitality in our home.
The person we're taking in.
Yeah.
Yeah. To take one another in And so if we came full circle back to the illustrator in the company who has a requirement to the use of AI, right? One of the things that we're talking about in parallel fashion there is whether or not the company is interested in taking in the person as an illustrator. Okay?
Or even developing a craft where the illustration takes in the viewer.
Yes, all of that.
And
so
you sever it at one point, you're severing it at the whole.
That's right. And then in the math of that equation, it doesn't take too many steps down the road where everybody's just floating around in open space, but no one's connected. And that was one of the features, as I think about it now, of the gray city and C.S. Lewis's Great Divorce. This purgatory kind of place where people are moving apart from one another. The city is expanding, not merely because of the addition of new inhabitants, but because people are moving ever further from one another in their aspirations. Okay? And it's gray because it's colorless, it's severed from legacy, it's severed from craft, it's only predicated on people pursuing their wants. Their wants are increasingly a spate of undiscerned compulsions that they have. And one of the guaranteed features of that dynamic is the absence of joy, because meaning is no longer discernible in such an environment. So I think we're on to something here. And it's not meant to be doom and gloom, right? It's just meant to be true. Like let's tell the truth about the things that we might be losing as we hurry headlong into the prospect of giving more and more of ourselves into this thing.
I think a lot of people are just going through life too, where it's like they have a real sense that it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
And
that what's bad?
Maybe that I'm disconnected to my neighbor.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if they could name that as the need, or that the way I'm moving through life feels broken. But maybe a trip or a thing that I can buy. And I think there's just this idea is like, I'm behind and I need to try and get ahead.
Yeah.
But I don't think people
That's
would,
right.
and so that's where this idea of efficiency comes in. Oh, I can move faster here.
That's
all of a
it.
sudden.
I can have fulfillment somehow.
Yeah. Finally.
That's right.
This thing will allow me to go fast enough.
That's the Silicon Valley promise.
And I think it lands to people as viable as a prospect, where it comes in and then all of a sudden it's, that's a potential solution. AI will finally allow me to get everything done that I need to get done in order for me to find joy and happiness again. I think that's how it lands with people.
Yeah. Well, that's the mythos of AI for sure.
And then, but I know there is part of this that might feel like a wet blanket. This episode is like, oh man, okay.
Yeah, too bad. Deal with it.
However, I actually think that there is life to be found right now in holding it differently.
No doubt.
In that my daughter's offering biltong to the neighbor of whatever, or the new person, or my South African friends Pierre and Robbie, like, who came over last night. That's immediately available.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Neighborliness is always at hand.
And therefore joy is immediately available for people too.
Yeah.
And so the idea that joy is not available might be the most powerful lie that people believe.
That's right.
And that's the gift of slowing down. It's not that if we say slow down, I think it hits people as even further delay from joy.
Sure. Yeah, that is an understandable and mistaken impression about what slowing down yields.
Yeah, prophets are often seen as like bearing bad news,
No doubt.
but I think they bear hard news for the sake of good.
Yeah. It strikes me that, I mean, the image, because I can just see it in my mind's eye. I can imagine well, again, because I've experienced it, but also just the joy of bringing your family to mind. Happy little girl in a sundress greets you at the door. And it strikes me, just as we're talking about this terminology, what's the distinctive feature inside of this conversation about that exchange between she and Pierre or she and Robbie?
Mm-hmm.
It's unmediated. Technology was not a part of that exchange in that moment. It is she and her human neighbor and her training and her rearing in the cultivated capacity to provide somebody a welcome. You know, you want to no longer delay on joy, welcome somebody into your presence. Get good at doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're taking a step forward into a new universe that is actually just an old universe. It's the universe. And the inversion, this philosopher I mentioned before, Dallas Willard, he wrote a book called The Divine Conspiracy, and the opening framing for it was he just recalls the story of this pilot who crashed to the ground in a fog because they thought they were ascending out of trouble. Okay? But they were upside down in the fog. They plummeted to the earth. And he uses that as an analog for our culture. And he wrote this 23 years ago now, whatever it was. But that's where we're at. And in an inverted world, we think the things that cause us joy will decrease our joy. We don't think properly any longer. But what could be more plainly beautiful and common as receiving the greeting of a little girl into her home as a welcome prior to encounter with her parents, you know? And so that's right, Jason. It is imminently available. But the antidote to these dynamics that people feel under the weight of information overload and technological overreach, etc., is to do the one thing that the technocrat can't promise, and that is to go and have an encounter with your neighbor. And the joy that is inherent in the offering of yourself into that space is itself a reversal of the thrust of technology in the way that it's commonly deployed, which is that you're going to serve yourself. And that's why people acquire this in the main. It's so that the self can be served into more of its wants, right? And so to put before people's minds that fulfillment is found in the offering of oneself. And then we have another first principle that we could leverage technology into. Okay? I'm going to use this technology if it could help me be a better welcome to my neighbor, be a more welcome presence to my neighbor. I don't know the immediate application of that in a home dynamic where someone's at your door in this case, but I can think of what I'm trying to do on my website, what Glass Canvas is trying to do with the use of technology here to provide welcome to neighbors into greater territories of meaning, right? An increased number of territories of meaning. And if that was the aim inside of the technologies that we both develop and utilize, we'd be way better off, of course. But we're currently in a situation, and maybe this can change through these kinds of dialogues, where those are not even known to be the questions to ask.
Mm.
How could my neighbor be served, right? It really does end up centering on the self. There is no neighborliness in the selling features of these things. You'll become a more efficient worker. You'll be able to become a wealthier person. You will be increasingly bereft of the demands on inconvenient aspects of daily work, those kinds of things.
Yeah. I have a few other thoughts that are kind of coming to mind. It's like, one is, as it relates to your neighbor, it's, I found myself recently with all of my source material, but really struggling to put that into a talk, you know,
Mhm,
like, and finding a flow and
Sure.
finding, you know, like, and before I say this, I think what's important to me is I can't just approach AI with fear.
Mm-mm.
I actually want to go towards it and say, and experience this in a discerned way.
Yeah, caution.
Caution, and also like, is there good here, and how do I help
Caution
that?
and hope.
Yeah, and so there's a very it's almost it's a immature view to say I'm just not going to deal with technology
That's
at
right.
all. Like, that would also be immature.
Yeah.
Um, and unwise would be I'm just going to embrace it full on and see where it goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in doing that, it was tremendously helpful that allowed me to deliver a talk that did love my neighbor, you know, and it was more coherent and easier for them to take in because I used AI. Now, the other things I noticed are like, oh, there's things that I didn't think here that are even good thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Should I be sharing those?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and one discerning principle is like, I'm not sure that thought is in me yet as knowledge.
Yeah. That's the dilemma.
And I'm like, I don't think I should say that one.
Right.
You know, like, but I can see that temptation being very easy. It's like, oh, that's good. You know?
Well, and I know you to be a very discerning person. I know you to have faced your days with rarefied intention, right? The way that you live, the conscientiousness you bring to life is uncommon. And it's a struggle even for you and for me to come to this technology and use it responsibly. And just to push back a little bit on the merit, right? I was able to find a coherence in the range of information I had and find a talk that could benefit my neighbor. That is categorically fantastic. It's wonderful.
Mm.
But a question I would ask alongside it is, what was lost to you in the availability of AI such that you didn't have to go to these additional lengths to find your coherence without it? And what kind of a self is built inside of that demand? In other words, the demand we all used to have in order to accrue knowledge of any kind. And I'm not saying that categorically one is de facto better than the other. That's all contingent on a range of considerations that we have to approach with real humility. But it is worth asking the question in every instance of the use of the thing. In every instance of the use of the thing. And I'm not convinced yet that simply because of a reason like the one that you just gave, that the use of the thing that we're talking about here, AI, and its presence in our lives is warranted on those grounds.
Yeah. And so the point that I want to make in that is we've talked about severing ourselves from the past
Yes.
by using it. We also sever ourselves to the future,
Mm-hmm.
because in if you take the animator example, if you take this talk example,
Yeah.
if I get too used to using the thing, what AI does is it's ultimately not original.
Mm-hmm.
It can take all the art that exists
Yeah.
and say, here's a remix of that art.
Mm-hmm.
But what it can't do is actually create a new style. I mean,
Right.
maybe it could, but not really,
Yeah.
right? It's not
It's
generative.
regurgitative. Yeah.
It's and it's a mathematical equation based on what is, not what. And so we're severing ourselves from a future of creativity and
That's right.
imagination.
That's right.
And so you start to say yes to that as a motion graphics animator. You're not going to start feeling something. You're not going to be able to align with the spirit of like you're cutting yourself off from the muse.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're cutting yourself off from true inspiration. Because in math will lead you to a predictable next step. Creativity in its truest form will allow yourself to inhabit the transcendent in order to create with the infinite. And therefore, all possibilities can remain open.
That's right.
And so the severing off of the future that can happen in our considerations is also that.
It is.
And
that's such a beautiful point, Jason.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I can invite us back into Paul Kingsnorth's work and thought, and I would really implore people to look into his thoughts on these matters.
Yeah, what's the best thing for them to start there?
You know what? In a future episode, maybe I'll come with some 5
resources?
recommendations.
Cool.
But
or we
right
can post
now,
them in the show notes or something like that.
But just a beautiful person inside of a deeply rich experiential journey of the very things that he's writing about. And, those are the authors I trust. They're living the thing that they're wrestling through. And we've tried to promote, and I feel like as a family, we've been failing on this recently. I've been failing as a father to promote to my children willed and planned separation from technology as a way of restoring their connection to their humanity, like with that in mind in particular. And the terminology that I heard Kingsnorth utilizing recently was technological asceticism, right? And the ascetic practices in the spiritual tradition were a willed coming away from something, and abstaining from something. And we get the word asceticism from the Greek term ascesis, and that is literally meaning to exercise something, right? And so to be exercised from our connection to technology.
Hey, just jumping in here, right after we recorded this, Pete reached out and just clarified that we might have gotten our wires crossed as we were having this section of the conversation. He did indeed mean exercise as in develop self-discipline, and not exercise as in cast out a demon, being the root of the word. Hope that clears things up. Back to the show.
And I think there's something very, very precious in that focus. And maybe that's something that we could issue as a challenge to people. As we said at the beginning in the kind of the preamble to this, it's not going anywhere, okay? Not in the foreseeable future, not without the some very drastic measures taken, right? We haven't talked yet about the implications to our grand human narrative. You come from the we both come from a Christian worldview, and the beginning of our story is that we're called to be gardeners. We're called to steward creatively and collaboratively steward life into more of itself, right? And so that's what we're being called to return to, is being wise stewards of creation. What doesn't get spoken to enough around this, but it's certainly starting to show up more, is this shift in the narrative on climate change that you notice among the progenitors of AI and the lords of the earth, as it were. You can't make arguments about climate change any longer if you've got data centers that are to an individual data center using 5 times the amount of energy and water as Manhattan in a given year. And again, like, what's the cost of all of that? So to have people in a neighborly sense, in a communal sense, hold values in relation to this technology that they are mutually accountable for in their neighborhood. And so to come to my children, or them to come to me, better still, and say, Dad, are you living according to your values? How many hours were you on a computer or on a phone this week because of your work or otherwise? And are you living out the ascetic values that you claim? And, I think that communities taking those on as social values, as cultural values, we're going to have to build new legacies. And that inside of culture against the monolith of this thing that we know now as AI. New cultural motifs are going to have to be engaged as communal against the size of this thing. And one of the ways that we could manifest that into local culture is to become people who live out the value of separation from technology so that we don't lose our humanity. And I don't mean in the ultimate sense. When I go on a 12-day hunt and I've been, in the way back and carrying my load, right? When I get home, I am very thankful for a water heater and the shower that I get to have and the comforts of my bed. And I'm really thankful for the air conditioner. But it's as though we have lost the facility for discerning how much is too much, right? Technology isn't inherently evil. But I would say that technology that is allowed to run on its own with any discernment is always evil, right? One of the definitions on what a demon is that I've come to appreciate in recent years, again, this is this philosopher Dallas Willard, just to reference the concept or where the idea comes from. He used to say that a demon is a complex of thought or emotion that has developed enough energy to run on its own. And you think about the way that these technologies manifest and then just grow legs of their own, as it were, and start running around in the world as their own agents, right? With their own agency, untethered to a legacy of transcendence, a spiritual tradition, a community, a communal form, a human good, right? And it might sound mad to some people out there, but on those terms, a lot of this is, we could think of it as demonic in that sense.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. The other fascinating point to all this is how we look for answers to life.
Yeah.
And when I have a question and I can just turn to ChatGPT or whatever, and as the questions that it gives you answers for, not necessarily that they're the right answers, are more and more available.
Mm-hmm.
I come from a tradition of which the communion of the saints is valuable.
That's right.
And we both have a tradition of where prayer
Yes.
is. But if my answers are immediately met by the phone,
Yeah.
then I'm not connected to the transcendent anymore.
No, you're praying to your phone.
Yeah.
Pray, give me this answer.
Yeah.
Pray, tell me, what ought I to do about this mental health dynamic? Pray, tell me, what are the ingredients in this recipe again?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not that we're asking God for ingredients or recipes
No,
or
no,
whatever, but
No.
but those things are, it is prayer. It's an act of,
That's what
it's
I
an
was
act
trying
of
to
prayer.
emphasize.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that we swim in prayer of various kinds,
Yeah.
right?
And we no longer inhabit a mythic worldview
Mm-hmm.
where the cosmos, as it were, is part of our conscious moving through the world.
Yeah.
It is now like, oh, okay, well, I'll just look up the answer for that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when Google kind of came out, like how you'd be in a conversation and then it was like, if there was a disagreement with two people, it would be like, well, let's just Google it.
Yeah,
and
let's
how
go
that
to the
ruined
authority. Yeah.
how that ruined interaction.
Yeah.
And I think that's just on steroids now in that way. But
what do you think it ruined?
I think in one sense, it's like there is an objective answer to those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But the way you could learn how to not, it's settled disagreement without going through debate and learning how to dialogue.
Agreed.
And so it immediately just became fact checking on each other.
And solidarity is lost in that. We
Yeah,
don't
ways
hold
to
this
relate
together anymore,
Yeah.
right? I have the right answer. I have the whole of the thing in my possession. And that is the quest of the technocrat, right? Is to come up with calculated terms that are the whole of a matter. We know this in the same way that we know a math equation. And mystery and human solidarity and uncertainty and a notion of the transcendent is lost in that space, right? So all that to say, I'm with you.
Yeah. I do feel like, to push into our animator example again, there are some tools, and maybe we can think through this, where there's just these like micro manual work. And so I think of like you and I, you've done more woodworking than I have, but I've done woodworking too. And like the right tool for the job, like I'm thankful I have a table, why am I blanking on the word?
Table saw?
A table saw.
Yeah.
Because I'd rather use that than hand saw the thing, and it's more accurate than what I would hand saw it with.
Yeah. Have you ever had to rip a 20-foot 2x10 by hand?
Yeah. And so in some degrees, like I understand we're shaped by our tools, and we can talk about that. But there's this thing in animation where like you have to like calculate ease, like so that the slowing down of an object on a screen, like as an example.
Sure.
And there's a finesse to it that you want to get right. And it's just changing the number. That's how it used to be when I started, like making films. And you're like, okay, how do I get this so that it feels good? And in some sense, there's now AI tools that just can help it get to that point faster.
Yeah.
And it's not just, oh, let me generate all this like immediately, but the tweaking of it becomes easier in the same way cutting with a table saw is easier. And then I also understand that if a CNC machine in woodworking does it for me, like, did I build it myself? Or like, where's the satisfaction from the thing coming from? And satisfaction being a human need. But I also feel like there can be greater satisfaction if I can get to the point that I pre-imagine quicker, because my tool is a better tool. And maybe I'm using objective language. If my tool is a more efficient tool, I like that,
Mm-hmm.
like, and um, I want to get to building a table so my family can sit around it, not because I want Japanese joinery. Although I'd love that, I just don't feel called. Like, I just never have a table
Sure.
if that's the case.
Sure.
And so I'm just trying to lay out how the other thing that's come with AI is actually more efficient tools. And it's not only these generative, um, inserting new thoughts into things. It actually has made some things more efficient in ways that feel helpful.
I agree. And in the case that you presented, excuse me, that that applies with an accompanying sense of relief, and we could even use the word blessing. You're blessed into the opportunity for the family to sit around the table. Dad was still involved in the making of the thing, right? It came as a artifact of your consciousness, and it was then presented into your home as a real thing. And AI helped you get there more efficiently. And that's a very virtuous and beautiful kind of example of um, uh, a role for AI that is servicing life, right? One of the concerns that I hold about the claim on efficiency is that the question about the work that was being done in the first place that is rendered more efficient by the use of AI in the workspace, question about the initial work isn't asked. And we live in an economy that was already severed from, or where work was already severed from meaning.
Mm.
And so, a good portion of the population, the subpopulations in the labor force that exists now, the ones that are shaking in their boots, are facing the prospect of the loss of their work. And somehow the threat of loss proves the real value of the task in the first place. That this was not a human good. That the department that crunches numbers on this incidental aspect of this industry and has 40 personnel there because of the enormity of this company. People didn't ask, is this something that I ought to be doing with my time and energy as gainful employment? And maybe you didn't have an option on being there in the first place. But we built these industries without questions about meaning and neighborhood. And the corporate sector has become a caricature of itself in that sense. And one of the claims on AI is that we can now kind of right the wrongs of the past. It isn't cast this way, but I think that's what's being stated there. We weren't doing meaningful work in the first place. Now we can streamline the aspects of our work that weren't meaningful. But we don't ask the question, why was that work being done at all? Okay? And if AI is only warranted because it makes meaningless work more streamlined, then we haven't solved for much. And I think that we need to ask questions like that. And they're hard questions to ask. They're so hard, in fact, that people think of them as impossible. Like, I couldn't possibly give that a second thought because I have to pay my mortgage, you know? But the long reach of not asking those questions is societal downfall. And increase in mortality because you have people dying at younger ages because they're so stressed out by the meaninglessness in their days. And we were already there. And against that backdrop, AI has this kind of illusory appeal to people. And so I would invite people to think about that too. Before the advent of AI, did my work have meaning? Was it connected to something that I was called to do? Did I receive an education with that in mind at all? And that becomes an invitation to look at society and societal values and what we're all on about together, right? And I'm not proposing that we move into that and try to solve for that right now. But that is one of the things that I think is not often enough considered when we are talking about the relief that people will experience because they don't have to do that anymore. Why did that happen in the first place? And if we don't ask that question, then we're just going to use AI to make more meaningless tasks. We haven't solved the issue.
Yeah. I don't think anyone was going to argue with you that we're in a culture where meaning and purpose are short.
Yeah.
They're not readily on offer.
Yeah.
Like we're in a crisis.
I'm just saying that we can't think through AI without holding that in mind as well.
Yeah. And the proposition of, maybe some of this meaningless work is going to go away provides some sense of relief for people.
And justification for the use of AI.
Which obviously can be problematic.
Right.
Without addressing the original gig. But I just want to hold for people. It's like, I imagine myself having this kind of conversation with the average Joe.
You and me both. I try to as often as I can.
And the game that you feel is just a part of reality that you have to play. It's like, I feel like it's like saying, hey, through that wardrobe is Narnia, or hey, there's a Matrix and you like have to leave it. And I think the belief of people that to say that, you can have a vocation or vocational expressions of work. And what I mean by vocation is like how I am particularly made working itself out. And we did talk about this in our previous series, which people can go and listen to. But that you can have a career in which you create value based on how you were made to create value.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to find that in your side hustle or your side, project. Although I think like maybe art as a hobby isn't a bad thing, or craft as a hobby. Like I don't want to do that, but that there is the potential of you finding meaning and purpose in your day job.
Yeah.
That's possible.
Yeah.
Or
that it should be aspired toward.
And that there is a potential that we could construct a society that discerns that, and that we would be better off because of it. That idea, I feel like, is almost like telling somebody gravity doesn't exist.
That's right. And that's the conclusion drawn by most people if they bring their sensibilities to thinking of this for even a fraction of a second. And then they just hop over the matter and do what they think that they must do, just to keep moving with the flow of things. And so
it can feel overwhelming to consider that as an option. Like how many steps would I have to take to do that?
It's going to be overwhelming, and not being overwhelmed is one of the things that we want to be impervious to.
Right.
And being overwhelmed is an inherent component of our humanity that draws us into community and back to God. And it's a signpost that we were never made to be an atomized subject, a sealed unit, an individual in the way that we think of the modern individual.
Man, that's fascinating because I think that's the legitimate temptation of AI,
It is, Jason.
because it actually helps me relieve the feeling of being overwhelmed,
Right. Which is
but through means that disconnect me from God.
and others. And others. Agreed. And so there's no part of this dialogue that's convenient. And there's no part of any meaningful dialogue that isn't going to cost you your life if you aspire in its direction. Like, that was always the bargain on the table. And I'm going to come back to the promise of the technocrat. The promise of the technocrat is that you can have fulfillment without having to go through that fire. That's what they promise. They've never delivered on it. Not once. I've never seen a person who was suddenly made virtuous and a dream to be around and a joy to be around because they had technology at their disposal. There's no hopscotching over what one must do in their living in order to become a fantastic person and a capacious person and a wise person. And I want to be around more of those, and I want to become one myself. And I want to become that in large part for you and for the people here and for my children and my wife. And the sooner that we surrender back into a shared understanding of that as the fragile human condition, a truer telling of our story, right? To bring it back to story, the sooner we begin to find solutions, right? And the solutions aren't some future mechanism. They're as old as the hills, and they were told to us from the beginning. And they reside in the wisdom tradition of our forebears. And they tell us that love of God and love of neighbor and service before self and meaningful work and craft tethered to calling is the way that things hold together, the way that the garden is properly tended. And we do that with a shared connection in a communal sense. There is no substitute for that. Hey, this is my humble opinion. And if we can keep that before our minds and our hearts, then we have a barometer for all of the rest of the matters that we're wanting to move in on here, and AI being just one of those matters on the table. But there is no substitute for that, and there will never be. Lewis made the claim in The Abolition of Man, there is not now, nor will there ever be another order of value. Okay? All that claim to be new orders of value are simply borrowed from the past. You're not going to come up with a new version of honesty, okay, or generosity, or of selflessness.
Perseverance.
You're not going to come up with something superior to those. They are the nature of human existence. They are the world that we live in. And hopefully, as we continue to turn this over, we can help generate an interest in the dialogue that is sustainable for however many people as want to participate in that. But that's where I find hope these days, is in having conversations like this. I come away fulfilled, because I had a human encounter and we experienced something that Edmund Husserl referred to as transcendental intersubjectivity in this space. And I can't get that with a chatbot. I can't get that with a Claude agent. I can only get that with people like Jason, And so I'm thankful. I'm thankful to be able to do this. And I think this is a virtuous use of technology. I'm thankful for this microphone and for the opportunity to to put this in front of people in a spirit of those who have ears to hear, let them hear. And in a spirit of I'm open to being entirely wrong about these matters, and I hope to be made right, to be put right in my thinking about them. How am I going to do that apart from sorting them through with people that I trust? Right? So thank you for being here with me in this.
Yeah, thank you for being here with me in this too.
Yeah.
I'm just immediately having to sort through some decisions that I've made, that have nothing to do with AI potentially. So we discerned that my wife and I, that we are going to take our kids to Mexico for a couple weeks this summer, partly to show them another culture and a whole host of reasons. But one of the things that I wanted to do is offer my kids responsibility for the trip.
Good move.
And them saying, hey, you guys have to research where we can go to eat, what activities that we're going to do ahead of time. But part of me is like, oh man, like, am I depriving them the opportunity of being in a third world?
The live exploration in the moment.
Yeah. And going, hey, does this place look like a place where we're going to have a good meal?
Yeah.
Because the risk is, well, no, we might not have a good meal somewhere.
Right.
You know, and I don't want to get sick. That would be a shame. But
what a great presentation of the tension involved in all of this.
For sure. For sure. Like, do I want my kids on the internet, like looking for 5-star reviews, or do I want to walk them to multiple places and go, is this one good? Like, what are you seeing? And
that'll be a weighing out between you and your good lady, and how much do we want to just
relax,
take a load off together and just be for a moment in holiday, right? The etymology of which is holy day.
Yeah.
And how much do we want this to be a leverage for their education?
Yeah.
Yeah. God bless you in your discernment of it.
But maybe what's convicting in it is like, I didn't even think of most of those things as being potentially depriving them of that opportunity.
Yeah.
But it's everywhere. Maybe that's the point I'm trying to share with my live example is that this kind of thought is so absent that we can even find ourselves
I think
running along those things.
You gave us a beautiful example there, and just allowed yourself to be presented as one among many.
Yeah, I'm in it with the people listening to this.
You and me both, buddy.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good spot to kind of land this one.
Yeah. I really look forward to this series, Jason. I think it's so timely. I'm concerned, about all of us in this space. And I know that we don't have to walk headlong into our doom. Like, it's not foregone. There's actually a different story that you and I both trust that says there's actually a forewritten outcome for all of this, that in the great mystery of our faith, we're meant to participate in securing, right? The outcome is secured, but the span of time in between now and then is in part contingent on our participation in the solution. And I can't think of a more relevant subject for our culture, for our families, for our children, for their children, than this right now. And I think it's worth spending some time on it. So, may God help us to think carefully and wisely and generously and joyfully and hopefully in the space.
Well, it was good being with you.
Yeah, you too, buddy.
We'll call it there for today.
Right.
Looking forward to more.
Yeah, thank you.